At Morixa Tales, we believe in the power of storytelling. Our scripts weave together deep emotions and dramatic turns to deliver justice where it is most needed. Experience captivating mysteries where the truth eventually shines through, leaving a lasting impact on your heart and mind.
My husband demanded a divorce. He wanted the house, the company, 12 properties, everything except our daughter. My lawyer thought I was insane when I said, give it all to him. At the final hearing, I signed everything away with a smile. Derek thought he'd won. He didn't know I'd spent 3 years documenting every crime. His smile vanished completely when he saw 2 people walk into the courtroom. I'm so grateful you're here. Before we begin, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from right now. And here's my question. Have you ever had to look defeated to win in the end? Reminder, this narrative blends real wisdom with fictional elements for impact. Any resemblance to actual people is coincidental, but the truth behind it is genuine. A Tuesday morning in late April, rain streaking the tall windows of the Multnomah County Courthouse, the smell of old wood and floor polish. And my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, about to sign his name on documents that would destroy him. He looked good, I had to admit. The charcoal suit I'd helped him pick out for a client dinner 3 years ago. That $15,000 watch he'd charged to the business account. Hair perfectly styled, the confident posture of a man who thinks he's won. Thomas Hutchins sat beside him, Derek's lawyer, expensive and experienced. 60-something silver at the temples, the kind of attorney who charges by the breath. Right now, Thomas was doing what good lawyers do, reading the fine print, while his client basked in premature victory. Judge Laura Bennett presided from the bench, reading glasses perched on her nose, silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. 25 years on the family court bench. She'd seen every variation of human ugliness that divorce could produce. Nothing surprised her anymore. But what was about to happen might come close. Mark Sullivan sat in the gallery building inspector's badge, clipped to his belt, a thick folder resting on his lap. He caught my eye briefly. I gave him the smallest nod. Not yet. Soon. Derek signed the first page with a flourish. The house. His now, or so he thought. Andrea Walsh, my attorney, sat beside me perfectly still. She knew what was coming. She'd tried 3 times to talk me out of this strategy. This goes against every instinct I have as a lawyer, she'd said. But she'd done it anyway, drawn up the papers exactly as I'd requested. Sometimes the best legal strategy looks like surrender. Derek moved to the second page. The company, Ramsey Development, 12 years of my unpaid architectural work, my designs, my late nights and early mornings, all under his name. He signed without hesitation. Third page. The properties, all 12 buildings. He practically smiled as he signed. Thomas was 3 pages behind reading the liability disclosure addendum. 30 pages detailing every debt, every obligation, every financial landmine attached to those assets Derek was so eager to claim. I watched Thomas's face, watched the moment he understood. His skin went from tan to ash in the span of a paragraph. His eyes widened. He flipped forward 2 pages, then back 3, like he was hoping he'd misread something. He hadn't. Derek, Thomas whispered, leaning close. Urgent, almost panicked. Derek, we need to stop. But Derek was already on page 5. The vehicles, his signature bold and certain. Derek, Thomas's whisper grew sharper. The disclosure. Did you read the disclosure? Later, Thomas. Derek didn't even look up. We're almost done. Thomas grabbed his arm. Actually, physically grabbed him. In all my years of watching court proceedings, I'd never seen a lawyer do that to his own client. Derek, you're assuming... Thomas's voice cracked. You're personally assuming all debt tied to these assets. Derek paused, pen hovering over page 7. What? The mortgages, the liens, the vendor lawsuits, all of it. You're signing personal liability. I watched Derek's face cycle through confusion dismissal, then the first flicker of doubt. His hand started shaking, just slightly, just enough. Judge Bennett cleared her throat. Is there a problem, Mr. Hutchins? Thomas looked at the papers, then at Derek, then at me. For just a second, our eyes met. He knew. In that moment, Thomas Hutchins, 35 years practicing law, knew exactly what I'd done. "No problem, Your Honor," Thomas said quietly, defeat in his voice. Because what could he do? His client had been warned. 3 times Thomas had recommended an independent financial review. 3 times Derek had refused. It was all documented, all on the record. Derek's hand moved to the final page, but the confidence was gone. The flourish had become a tremor. "Mr. Ramsey," Judge Bennett prompted, "do you need a moment?" Derek stared at the paper, at his signature on all the previous pages, at the empire he'd fought so hard to keep. Then he signed. Because what else could he do? Backing out now would mean questions, delays, scrutiny. And Derek had always operated on the principle that forward momentum solved problems. His signature looked smaller on that last page, tighter, like he was already trying to make himself invisible. Judge Bennett's gavel came down, one sharp crack that seemed to echo forever. Divorce granted. Mr. Ramsey assumes all marital assets as specified. Mrs. Ramsey is awarded the settlement as agreed. She looked at both of us over her reading glasses. This court is adjourned. Derek sat frozen, paper white. Thomas was frantically flipping through the liability disclosure, his face growing more horrified with every page. I gathered my documents slowly, carefully, like I had all the time in the world, because I did. I'd waited 3 years. I could wait another 30 seconds to stand up. Andrea touched my arm gently. "How do you feel?" I looked across the table at Derek, at the man I'd loved for 12 years. At the man who'd taken credit for my work, tried to destroy my career, weaponized our daughter, and ultimately tried to have me killed. "Like I can breathe," I whispered. For the first time in 3 years, I smiled. A real smile. Not the performance I'd been giving for months. This one came from somewhere deep and true and satisfied. Because every building Derek had just signed, for every property he'd fought to keep, every asset he'd demanded, in the divorce, they were all about to become his prison. I'd designed them that way, literally, but I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how we got here, to understand how a woman everyone thought had given up actually played the longest game of her life, you need to know where it started. You need to understand what kind of man Derek Ramsey was, and what kind of woman I became when I finally saw him clearly. 12 years ago in a different Portland spring, I met a man who seemed like everything I'd ever wanted. He wasn't. Gallery 234 smelled like wine and ambition that evening. Cheap Pinot Grigio for the junior architects, the good stuff for the partners. I clutched my plastic cup and tried to look like I belonged. 24 years old, 6 months out of architecture school, working at Cooper & Wells, doing CAD drafting, computer-aided design, the unsexy foundation of every beautiful building. I spent my days translating other people's sketches into technical drawings. My own designs lived in a notebook under my bed. Portland's architecture scene was brutal in a polite Pacific Northwest way. Everyone talked about sustainable design and innovative green spaces while quietly elbowing each other out of the way for commissions. The city prided itself on LEED certified buildings and urban planning that honored nature, beautiful on the surface, cutthroat underneath. I was there that March evening because my boss, Mr. Cooper, couldn't make it. "Network for me," he'd said like it was that easy. Like I wasn't the youngest person in the room by 5 years, the least established, wearing a dress from Target while everyone else wore designer labels. I was studying the hors d'oeuvres table. At least the food was free when someone spoke behind me. "The salmon's better than it looks. The crackers are stale." I turned. He was maybe 6 feet, dark hair starting to gray at the temples, even though he couldn't have been past 30. Good suit, confident posture. The kind of man who'd never clutched a plastic wine cup and wondered if he belonged. "Thanks for the review," I said. "I'll adjust my strategy accordingly." He laughed. Actually laughed, not the polite chuckle people give at networking events. "I'm Derek Ramsey, Ramsey Development." The name meant nothing to me then. Should have, maybe. Small but growing real estate development company. I found that out later. "Audrey Pierce, Cooper & Wells." I shook his hand. Firm grip. He held eye contact just long enough to feel significant. "What do you do at Cooper & Wells?" "CAD work, mostly. Technical drawings." I tried not to sound as disappointed as I felt. But you want a design? Not a question, a statement. I blinked. How did you? You've been staring at that rendering. He nodded toward a framed drawing on the wall. Some partner's residential project, all clean lines and passive solar. And you've been mentally redesigning it for the last 5 minutes. I can tell by your face. Heat crept up my neck. The southern exposure is wrong for Portland weather patterns. You'd get glare 9 months of the year. See, he smiled. Designer, not drafter. Something in my chest loosened. Someone saw it. After 6 months of feeling invisible, someone actually saw what I could do. I'm looking for an architect, Derek said. Someone who understands that buildings should work with their environment, not against it. Someone who sees potential in spaces other people overlook. You're hiring, my heart jumped. Not exactly. He pulled out a business card, heavy stock embossed lettering, simple. Ramsey Development. I acquire properties, renovate them, build value. I see potential everywhere. But I need someone who can turn vision into blueprints, into reality. I took the card, studied it. Ramsey Development. No other names, just his. I can't pay much starting out, he continued. Company's still growing, but I'm building something real here, something lasting. And I need a partner who can see what I see. Partner. The word hung in the air between us. Can I think about it? I asked. Take all the time you need, but Audrey. He met my eyes again. I don't offer this to everyone. You have something. Talent, yes, but also hunger, drive. I recognize that. He walked away before I could respond, left me standing there with his business card and a head full of possibility. I should have paid more attention to that card, to the fact that it only had his name, that there was no room on it for anyone else's. But I was 24 and hungry and so tired of being invisible. 3 days later, I called him. The 18 months that followed felt like a montage from a romantic movie. We met for coffee to discuss projects. Coffee became lunch. Lunch became dinner. Work conversations blended into life conversations. He told me about his vision for Portland's urban landscape. I showed him my notebook of designs. He called them brilliant. I believed him. We went to viewings of properties he was considering. He asked my opinion on everyone. Made me feel essential, valued, seen. This is what partnership looks like, he said one evening, standing in an empty warehouse space in northwest Portland. Rain drummed on the roof. 2 people building something bigger than themselves. 6 months in, we kissed for the first time in that same warehouse. Dust motes in the air, the smell of old wood and possibility. By month 12, I was designing my first project for him, a small residential renovation. He called it our first collaboration. By month 18, he proposed. Not fancy. No restaurant or public display. Just the 2 of us in his apartment on a Tuesday night. Thai takeout on the coffee table. Rain against the windows, always rain in Portland. Marry me, he said. Be my partner in everything. Business, life, family, build something real with me. I said yes before he finished the sentence. We married that June at a small ceremony. Courthouse first then dinner with 15 people at a Pearl District restaurant. I wore a simple white dress. He wore the same suit from Gallery 234. When I signed the marriage certificate, I became Audrey Ramsey. Pierce was my grandmother's name, my mother's name, my name. But Ramsey felt like the future, like partnership, like building something together. Riley came 2 years later. I was 26, working from home, designing around her nap schedule. Derek held our daughter for the first time in the hospital, and I watched something shift in his face. Now we're a real family, he said softly. Now we build something that lasts. I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. I believed in us. In the partnership he'd promised, in the vision of 2 people creating something beautiful together. What I didn't understand yet was that partnership meant something very different to him than it did to me. That while I was dreaming of our names side by side on projects, he was already planning a company with only his name on the door. For years I built his dreams. I just didn't realize I was disappearing in the process. The first project came 3 months after Riley was born. A small residential building in southeast Portland, nothing fancy, just a 4-unit apartment complex with clean lines and good bones. I designed it in stolen hours between feedings and diaper changes, Riley asleep in the bassinet beside my drafting table. When I brought Derek the final drawings, he kissed my forehead. "This is perfect, babe. Exactly what I envisioned." I remember feeling proud. We're building something together. Then came the conversation about payment. "Why would I pay you?" Derek laughed not unkindly. "You're my wife. This is our company. Paying you would just be moving money from one pocket to another." It made sense at the time. We shared everything: bank accounts, goals, a daughter. Why complicate things with separate paychecks? Besides, he added, pulling me close, what's mine is yours. What's ours is ours. The building went up with a sign out front, Ramsey Development. No mention of the architect. No mention of me. "That's industry standard," Derek explained. "The developer gets the credit. That's just how it works." I didn't know enough to argue. I was 26 years old, holding a baby, working from home. What did I know about industry standards? By the time Riley started kindergarten, the projects had gotten bigger. We moved from residential to mixed use, from 4 units to 40. I did everything: the designs, the code reviews, the client coordination, even the bookkeeping, because Derek hated numbers. 60 hours a week while my daughter learned to read and write and ask questions I didn't always know how to answer. Derek took every meeting, every presentation, every award. My vision brought this to life. He'd tell clients standing in front of my floor plans. I wanted something that honored Portland's architectural heritage while pushing into the future. I'd stand in the back of the room, Riley's hand in mine, watching him gesture at my work. Once at a Chamber of Commerce breakfast, someone asked him about his design process. "I see it in my head first," Derek said, spinning the story. "Then I make it happen. That's the difference between dreamers and builders' execution." Riley tugged my sleeve. "Mommy, why don't you go to work like Daddy?" My throat closed. In my daughter's eyes, I didn't work. I just existed. At home. Doing nothing that mattered. That night, I tried to explain to Riley what I actually did. She listened politely, the way kids do when adults talk about things they don't understand. Then she asked if she could have a snack. Even my own daughter didn't see me. 4 years later, when Riley was 9 and I'd just turned 34, my college roommate Raven Miller came to town for a conference. She'd started her own firm in San Francisco, won a sustainability award, had her face in Architectural Digest. We met for coffee at Stumptown, and she asked about my portfolio. I pulled up the Ramsey Development website, showed her the projects. 11 buildings across Portland, each one bearing my fingerprints, my obsession with natural light, my thing about threshold spaces, my signature use of reclaimed materials. Raven frowned. "These are gorgeous. But where's your name?" "It's a family business. Derek handles the public-facing stuff." "Audrey," she put her phone down, "you can't use these for your portfolio. Not professionally. Not without proper credit." The coffee turned sour in my stomach. That night, I asked Derek about it, carefully, diplomatically. "The buildings have our name on them," he said, eyes still on his laptop. "Ramsey, that's your name too, remember. Legally, yes, but professionally, you're being overly sensitive." He closed the laptop with a decisive click. "This is how family businesses work. You think every wife of every developer gets individual credit? This is about US. The family, not ego. But it wasn't about the family. It was about him. About Derek Ramsey, developer. Derek Ramsey, visionary. Derek Ramsey, who built an empire on his wife's uncredited talent while she raised his child and balanced his books and made his dinners and asked for nothing in return except to exist as a person with her own professional identity. I stopped asking after that. 3 years ago on a Tuesday night in late March, with rain hammering the windows, the way it does in Portland when winter won't quite let go, everything changed. I was reviewing the quarterly financials, something I did every few months to make sure our tax estimates were accurate. Derek was working late. Again. 3rd time that week. The numbers felt wrong. Transfers I didn't remember making, expenses that didn't match our records. I dug deeper, cross-referencing bank statements with our business accounts, following digital breadcrumbs through spreadsheets that should have been simple. 3 hours later, I'd found hidden accounts, unusual payments, properties flagged with internal code violation warnings. A note Derek had written to himself buried in a folder marked Admin Handle Mitchell. I sat in our home office until dawn broke over Portland, staring at numbers that told a story of deception. By morning, I knew 3 things. My husband was a fraud, his empire was collapsing, and I had a choice to make. I could have woken Derek right then, confronted him, demanded answers. Instead, I closed the laptop, made breakfast, and said nothing, because I just had a better idea. The morning sun came through our kitchen windows the way it always did, turning everything warm and golden and normal. Derek sat at the breakfast table reading something on his phone, coffee in hand. Riley was eating cereal and complaining about a math test. I stood at the stove making scrambled eggs, my hands steady, even though I'd been awake for 27 hours straight. "Sleep okay, babe?" Derek asked without looking up. I set the eggs on the table. "Fine, you got in late." "Big project, you know how it is." He smiled at me, that easy, charming smile that had won me over 12 years ago. The smile of a man who had no idea his wife had spent the entire night discovering he was a criminal. I smiled back, kissed him on the forehead, packed Riley's lunch with the crusts cut off her sandwich exactly how she liked it. When they left Derek to his office, Riley to school, I stood alone in our kitchen and felt the decision settle into my bones like concrete hardening. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. Maybe not ever, not the way he'd expect. Because I understood Derek in a way he'd never understood me. I'd spent 12 years watching him work, watching him charm clients and manipulate contractors and spin stories that made him the hero of every narrative. He was a master at controlling situations, at making people doubt their own perceptions. If I confronted him now, he'd gaslight me. "You're imagining things. You don't understand business. You're being paranoid." He'd hide evidence, move money, maybe even file for divorce, immediately taking everything before I had a chance to protect myself or Riley. No. The smarter play was patience, documentation, building a case so airtight that when the moment came, he'd have nowhere to run and no story convincing enough to save him. Let him think he was getting away with it. Let him grow comfortable in his deception. Meanwhile, I'd be creating a paper trail that would bury him. That afternoon, while Riley was at her friend's house and Derek was allegedly meeting with investors, I created a folder on my laptop. Not under our shared cloud storage, under an account I set up using my maiden name. I called it Project Pierce. Then I started copying, systematically, methodically, every financial record I could access, every project file, screenshots of bank statements, emails with suppliers, contracts with subcontractors. I photographed documents with my phone, uploaded them to the encrypted folder, then put everything back exactly where I'd found it. The building code violations were damning. 12 properties with issues flagged in Derek's internal notes problems he knew about but had pushed through anyway. And the name Gary Mitchell kept appearing always in connection with approvals that should never have been granted. Payments to Mitchell labeled consulting fees that lined up perfectly with permits issued for buildings that shouldn't have passed inspection. One property stood out, 47 Riverside Drive. Black mold documented in Derek's private notes, inadequate ventilation, fire safety violations. But it had been approved anyway and tenants had moved in. I pulled up news archives on a hunch. Found what I was looking for, a death 3 years ago. Logan Sterling, 23 years old, found dead in his apartment at 47 Riverside Drive. The official cause was listed as accidental overdose, but the family had questioned whether the building conditions, the mold, the poor air quality had contributed to his health problems in the months before. I tagged the file, noted the connection, kept digging. By the time Riley came home asking what was for dinner, I'd created backups on 3 separate hard drives and uploaded everything to a secure cloud server Derek would never find. I set a monthly reminder to update the files to verify nothing had been deleted or tampered with. For 3 years, I lived a double life. The loving wife, by day making breakfast and attending Derek's work events and nodding supportively when he talked about his vision for Portland's architectural future. The silent accountant by night documenting every lie, every bribe, every code violation, every dollar that moved through accounts he thought were hidden. I watched him, learned his patterns, waited for the right moment. Because I knew Derek. I knew men like him. Eventually, they get bored. they start looking for something new, something exciting. Someone who makes them feel powerful in ways their tired, invisible wives no longer can. I just had to wait for him to find her, or better yet, for me to find her first. 18 months before everything fell apart, I found the receipt doing laundry on a Sunday morning. Derek had claimed he was too busy to help with household chores, a pattern so old I'd stopped questioning it, so I was alone in our utility room, checking pockets before tossing his work clothes into the washer. Years of finding loose change and forgotten business cards had made it habit. The paper was crumpled in the breast pocket of his charcoal suit jacket. I almost threw it away without looking. Almost. The Heathman Hotel, Portland, Thursday night 2 weeks prior. Room upgrade to a suite. Champagne. Roses. I stood there holding the receipt, my hands beginning to shake. Thursday. The night Derek had texted me that he was working late doing a site inspection. There had been no site inspection that week. I managed his calendar, coordinated his appointments. I would have known. Riley was upstairs in her room, headphones on, doing homework and listening to music loud enough I could hear the bass through the ceiling. She had no idea her mother was standing in the laundry room discovering her father's infidelity through a hotel bill, itemizing romance he'd never shown his wife. The first wave was nausea. The second was tears, hot, angry, humiliating tears that I hated myself for crying. Because despite everything I knew about Derek's financial fraud, about his professional deception, about the building violations and the bribes, this somehow hurt more, or hurt differently. Added another layer to a betrayal that already had so many layers I'd lost count. I gave myself 10 minutes, cried in the laundry room with the washer running to mask the sound. Then I wiped my face, took 3 deep breaths, and started thinking strategically. The credit card statements I'd been documenting for 3 years suddenly made more sense. Those business dinners at romantic restaurants, the midweek hotel stays charged to the company account, monthly flower purchases, none of which had ever arrived at our house. I'd noted them as possible fraud, never considered they might be gifts for someone else. I needed more information, confirmation, details that would matter if this became relevant later. My friend Jessica's divorce attorney had recommended a private investigator once during a wine-soaked conversation about terrible husbands. I'd filed the name away thinking I'd never need it. Pete Douglas, discreet, thorough, expensive. I called him that afternoon while Derek was at the gym and Riley was at soccer practice. Find out who I told Pete. Don't approach them. Don't confront anyone. Just document everything. A week later, Pete sent his report with photographs. Her name was Autumn Sterling, 29 years old, interior designer, talented, based on her portfolio. They'd met at the Portland Design Expo 3 months ago. Lunch meetings had progressed to dinners, then to hotels. The photos showed them at a restaurant I recognized, the kind with dim lighting and tables positioned for privacy. Derek's hand covering hers across white linen. Autumn laughing at something he'd said, looking at him the way I used to look at him 12 years ago before I understood what he was. She was beautiful, younger than me by 7 years, successful in her own right with a design firm that had won regional awards. I studied her professional website, her portfolio, the testimonials from clients who praised her vision and attention to detail. Her About Me section mentioned a younger brother who had passed away. No name given, just a line that read, "My work honors his memory." Something about that phrase snagged in my mind, but I was too emotionally raw to focus on why it felt significant. I spent 3 days considering my options. Path A was straightforward: confront Derek, file for divorce, immediately fight for half of everything in court while he hid assets and spun stories about his unstable, paranoid wife. Path B was less clear but potentially more powerful: use this information somehow. Turn his infidelity into leverage. But I needed to understand Autumn Sterling better first. So I researched LinkedIn, Instagram, professional platforms, archived news articles. Her family parents still living in Portland, brother deceased 3 years ago. The brother's name, Logan Sterling. I stopped breathing, pulled up my encrypted files, cross-referenced the name with my documentation of Derek's properties. Logan Sterling, resident at 47 Riverside Drive, dead at 23. The building Derek owned, the one with code violations he'd bribed Gary Mitchell to ignore. Black mold. Poor ventilation. An accidental overdose, the official report said. but the family had questioned whether building conditions had contributed to his declining health. And now Logan's sister was sleeping with the man who owned that building. Did she know? Had she made the connection? Or was Derek's charm working on her, the same way it had worked on me, making her feel seen, special, chosen? While he carefully avoided mentioning which properties he owned, which tenants had suffered in his buildings, I went back through Autumn's social media searching posts from 3 years ago, found memorial photos of Logan, grief-raw captions about justice and accountability, hashtags demanding answers. Then, after a few months' silence on the subject, either she'd moved on or she'd gone underground with her grief. 2 possibilities crystallized. If Autumn didn't know Derek was responsible for her brother's death, she needed to learn the truth. If she already knew and was close to Derek for a reason, if this relationship was her own version of reconnaissance, then we had something in common. Either way, she had motive. I had evidence. Separately, we were vulnerable women Derek could manipulate or discard. Together, we could build something he'd never anticipate. A strategy he couldn't charm his way out of. A trap designed by people who understood exactly how his mind worked, because we'd both fallen for his lies. The plan formed slowly, carefully, like architecture taking shape from rough sketches into blueprints. I would approach her, carefully, offer information without demands, see how she responded, see if she wanted justice for Logan as much as I wanted freedom from Derek. It was a risk. She could go straight to Derek, warn him, destroy everything I'd spent 3 years building. But some risks were worth taking. Some alliances were worth the gamble. And I was done playing it safe. 2 weeks after discovering Autumn's connection to Logan, I still hadn't figured out how to approach her without triggering every possible disaster. An email felt too traceable. Derek occasionally checked my accounts when he thought I wasn't paying attention. A phone call was too abrupt, too easy for her to hang up or panic. What I needed was a conversation she couldn't escape from immediately, but also couldn't feel cornered by. The answer came from studying her patterns the way I'd studied Derek's. Autumn grabbed coffee at Stumptown Coffee Roasters every Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock, always ordering the same vanilla latte, always settling into the corner table with her laptop to review design plans before heading to job sites. Creatures of habit, all of us, in ways that made us predictable. I positioned myself there on a Tuesday with an architecture magazine and a cappuccino. I barely touched my stomach too tight with nerves to actually drink anything. When Autumn walked in, dark hair pulled back, professional but not formal, moving with the easy confidence of someone who had no idea her world was about to tilt, I waited. Let her order. Let her sit down and open her laptop. Let her take that first sip of coffee before I stood up and crossed the cafe with my heart hammering so hard I thought she might hear it. "You're Autumn Sterling, right?" She looked up confused but not yet alarmed. "Yes, I'm Audrey Ramsey." I watched her face change as she processed the last name. Derek Ramsey's wife. The color drained from her skin. She started to stand, gathering her laptop, and I knew I had about 3 seconds before she bolted, and I lost any chance of making this work. "Please." I kept my voice low, urgent. "I'm not here to make a scene. I'm here because of Logan." She froze. Actually froze mid-motion, her hand still on her laptop bag. "How do you know about Logan?" "Can we talk 5 minutes? If you want me to leave after that, I'll leave. But I think you need to see something first." She sat back down slowly, warily, like someone approaching a wild animal that might bite. I pulled out my phone, opened the encrypted folder I'd prepared specifically for this conversation, and showed her the property deed for 47 Riverside Drive. "This is my husband's building," I said quietly. "The one where Logan died." "What?" Her voice came out strangled. "You didn't know." She shook her head, staring at the document on my phone screen like it might be photoshopped, might be some cruel trick. "Derek told me he did real estate development, but he never said which properties." I swiped to the next image. Building code violation reports. Gary Mitchell's approval stamps despite red flags in the inspection notes. Derek's internal memos about black mold, about ventilation issues he decided to ignore because fixing them would delay the project and cost money he didn't want to spend. Autumn's hands trembled as she read, her professional designer's eye catching details that told the story even without my explanation. He knew Derek knew the building wasn't safe. Worse than that, he bribed the inspector to approve it anyway. Oh my God. She pressed her hand to her mouth. My brother. Logan was only 23 years old. I know, I'm so sorry. And I was genuinely deeply sorry for this young woman whose grief I was about to weaponize for my own purposes. But I can help you get justice for him. Why? She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Why would you help me? I'm sleeping with your husband. Because he's destroying more than just a marriage. He's destroying lives, and he'll keep doing it until someone stops him. I laid out the proposal, carefully watching her face as I explained. I had 3 years of documentation, financial records, building violations, evidence of fraud, but I needed current intelligence. Derek trusted Autumn, confided in her, let his guard down around her in ways he no longer did with me. If she continued the relationship, she could gather information in real-time conversations, plans, admissions he'd make when he thought he was impressing his young girlfriend with his business acumen. When the divorce came, and it would come, because men like Derek always traded up, eventually, we'd have everything we needed. Not just to protect me in the settlement, but to bring criminal charges that would actually stick. You want me to spy on him, Autumn said flatly. I want to give you a chance to make Logan's death mean something. To stop Derek before another family loses someone they love to his negligence. The silence stretched between us, punctuated by the hiss of the espresso machine and the low murmur of other customers who had no idea 2 women were plotting the downfall of a man over lattes and pastries neither of them would eat. What if I actually have feelings for him? Autumn asked finally. I met her eyes. Then you need to know who he really is, what he's capable of, and decide if you can live with that. If I do this, she hesitated, I don't want money. This isn't about money, it's about truth. How long? Until he leaves me. He will eventually. Men like Derek always want the newer model. The bitterness leaked through despite my attempt to sound clinical. When that happens, when he files for divorce, thinking he's going to take everything, that's when we act. Autumn stared at her untouched coffee for a long moment. Then she extended her hand across the table and I took it. Her grip was firm, decided. I'll give you a burner phone, I said. Text only. Use the word recipe as a code if you have information. Never use his name in messages. For Logan, she said. For Logan, and for everyone else he's hurt. We left the coffee shop separately, her first, then me. 10 minutes later, 2 women bound by one man's crimes and our shared determination to end them. Autumn would go back to Derek's apartment, slip back into his bed, play the role of devoted girlfriend. I would go back to my documentation, my careful record-keeping, my performance as the oblivious wife. And we would wait. For 15 months, Autumn played her part flawlessly. She texted me Derek's plans before he executed them, warned me when he scheduled meetings with lawyers, photographed documents he left carelessly on his desk when he thought she was in the shower, built a case brick by brick while pretending to build a future with a man she now knew had killed her brother through negligence and greed. Then, exactly as I'd predicted, Derek decided he wanted his freedom. Not from Autumn, she was still useful, still decorative, still young and impressive. From me. From the marriage that had become inconvenient now that I'd served my purpose, building his empire. He just didn't realize I'd been building something else entirely. 3 months ago, on an ordinary Tuesday evening, I stood in our kitchen making Derek's favorite pasta penne arrabbiata with the exact amount of red pepper flakes he liked. Not too spicy, but enough to taste the heat. Riley was upstairs doing homework with music drifting down through the floorboards, some pop song about heartbreak that she'd played on repeat for weeks. The rhythm had become part of our household soundtrack. Derek came home at 6:30 earlier than usual. I noticed it immediately because men like Derek kept predictable schedules and deviations meant something. He set his briefcase by the door with careful precision, loosened his tie, and looked at me with an expression I recognized determination mixed with rehearsal. He'd practiced whatever he was about to say, probably in front of his bathroom mirror that morning. How was your day? I asked, stirring the sauce. We need to talk. Can you sit down? Not, let's talk after dinner, or when Riley's asleep. Just an immediate summons to the kitchen table, the same scarred oak surface, where we'd eaten thousands of meals, where Riley had learned to read, where we'd pretended to be a family for 12 years. I turned off the stove and sat, my heart hammered, even though I'd been expecting this moment for months, had prepared for it, had orchestrated circumstances to make it inevitable. Knowing something is coming doesn't stop your body from reacting when it arrives. I want a divorce. Direct. No preamble. No apology in his voice, just a statement of fact delivered with the same tone he used to discuss property acquisitions. I let my face show shock, let my hand fly to my mouth. What why? I'm not happy. Haven't been for a long time. I think you've felt it too. I thought we were working through things. Riley needs both of us. He cut me off with a gesture dismissive, like swatting away an inconvenient fly. Riley will be fine. She's almost grown. This is about us, about me needing to be happy. Is there someone else? The lie came smooth as silk. This isn't about anyone else. It's about me needing more from life. I knew about Autumn had known for 18 months, but I played the oblivious wife perfectly. Let confusion and hurt cross my face in waves he could interpret as genuine devastation. I've already talked to a lawyer, Derek continued. Thomas Hutchins. That name sent actual alarm through me. Thomas Hutchins wasn't just expensive. He was vicious, the kind of attorney wealthy men hired when they wanted to destroy their wives in court. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. Derek had been planning this carefully, probably for months. I want to be fair, he said, but we need to be clear about expectations. He pulled out a handwritten list. Actually pulled out a list he'd written on legal pad paper, numbered and everything, like he was delegating tasks to an employee. His demands. The house, he'd bought it. He said with his money. The company, his name, his vision, his work. All 12 properties in the portfolio. Both cars. The joint accounts. His generosity toward me. You can keep Riley, said casually, like our daughter was a piece of furniture he didn't have room for in his new life. Personal belongings. I'll give you some money to get started. Let's not be difficult about this. I performed devastation beautifully. Derek, please. 12 years. We built this together. No, Audrey. His voice went cold, the mask of civility slipping just enough to show the contempt underneath. I built it. You helped. There's a difference. Each word landed like a slap. The erasure of 12 years of unpaid labor, of designs I'd created while nursing an infant, of bookkeeping and client management and all the invisible work that kept his empire running while he collected awards and gave interviews about his vision. Where are Riley and I supposed to live? I let my voice break, let tears start some performance, all of it useful. Find an apartment. I'll cover first and last month's rent. After that, you'll need to get a job. He stood up. Our conversation apparently concluded to his satisfaction. Move into the guest room tonight. Thomas said it's important to establish separation. Then he left. Just walked out of the kitchen, leaving me alone at the table with cold pasta sauce and the wreckage of a marriage I'd been planning to escape for 3 years. I sat there for 20 minutes letting the tears come. Some for the marriage I'd thought we had 12 years ago before I understood who Derek really was. Some for Riley, who would wake up tomorrow in a broken home. Some from pure rage at his casual cruelty, his assumption that I'd accept whatever scraps he threw my way. Riley came downstairs eventually, her face worried. Mom, what's wrong? I wiped my eyes, forced a smile that probably looked terrible. Dad and I need to work through some grown-up stuff. Everything's gonna be okay, honey. She didn't believe me. 14-year-olds are perceptive about lies, but she nodded and went back upstairs. What else could she do? That night, I moved my things into the guest room. The smallest bedroom in the house, barely big enough for a twin bed, usually filled with storage boxes and off-season clothes. The symbolism wasn't lost on me, pushed into the smallest possible space, made to feel like an inconvenience in my own home. I lay on that narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, and texted Autumn on the burner phone. He did it. Filed for divorce. Her response came quickly. I'm so sorry. What do you need? Stay close to him. He'll get cocky now, careless. I turned off the phone and lay in the dark, thinking about Derek downstairs in our bedroom. His bedroom now probably calling Autumn on his regular phone to celebrate his freedom. He thought he'd won. Thought he'd successfully maneuvered me into a corner where I'd have to accept whatever he offered just to survive. Thought I'd spent the last 3 years being the oblivious wife while he planned his exit strategy. He had no idea I'd been 3 steps ahead of him the entire time. Let him think I was broken. Let him take everything, the house, the company, the properties, all of it. Because everything he took was poisoned. Every asset had a paper trail. Every property had violations. Every account had evidence of fraud. One tear rolled down my face in the darkness for the woman I'd been at 24, who'd believed in partnership and love and building something beautiful together. Then the grief hardened into something else, something cold and sharp and absolutely certain. If he wanted a war disguised as civility, he'd get more than he could possibly imagine. The next morning, I woke in that guest room with absolute clarity. My first call was to Andrea Walsh, the sharpest divorce attorney in Portland. By 9 a.m., I was sitting in her office. She thought she was meeting a devastated woman in need of rescue. She had no idea what was about to walk through her door. Andrea Walsh's law office occupied the 20th floor of a steel and glass tower in downtown Portland, the kind of building Derek would have envied: clean lines, expensive materials, views of Mount Hood on clear days. The receptionist greeted me with professional sympathy, the expression people reserve for divorcing women they assume are victims. "Mrs. Ramsey, Andrea will see you now." Andrea was 52, silver-haired, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her office walls displayed the usual markers of success: diplomas from prestigious schools, awards from bar associations, photographs with judges and politicians. She had a reputation for never losing. Women hired her when they wanted blood. "Mrs. Ramsey," she shook my hand firmly, "I understand you need representation." I'd prepared my appearance carefully that morning. Minimal makeup, red-rimmed eyes clothed, slightly rumpled. The image of a woman who'd cried through the night and barely held herself together for this meeting. "Please sit. Tell me what happened." I explained the 12-year marriage, Derek's sudden announcement, his demands for everything. Showed her the handwritten list he'd given me at the kitchen table. Watched her eyebrows rise as she scanned his requirements. "This is aggressive," she said carefully. "Let's talk about what you're actually entitled to. You helped build the company, correct? I did all the design work. 12 years, no salary. Then you're entitled to half the company, half the marital assets. Oregon is a community property state, Mrs. Ramsey. You have rights." I let my voice go small, defeated. "What if I don't want to fight?" Andrea stopped studying me with sharp eyes that had probably seen every divorce strategy imaginable. "I'm sorry. What if I just let him have it? Take some money and start over. Mrs. Ramsey, we're talking about millions of dollars in assets. Your labor, your time, your contributions." "I know." I twisted my hands together, a gesture I'd practiced in the mirror. "But fighting means years of litigation. Riley caught in the middle. Media attention on the company. And Derek, he'll make it ugly. He'll drag everything through the mud. That's exactly what he's counting on. That you'll be too tired or too scared to fight back." I let tears start some genuine emotion mixed with strategic performance. "I am tired. I am scared. I just want peace for Riley." Andrea leaned back in her chair, concern replacing her initial professional assessment. "I need to be honest with you. If you don't fight, you're giving up your future financial security, everything you worked for. Could I walk away with nothing? Let him take everything? Is that legally possible?" "Yes, but why would you want to?" "Because I need this over. I need to protect Riley from a custody battle. I need—" My voice broke convincingly. "I just need to be done." Andrea sighed, the sound of a lawyer watching a client make a terrible decision. "All right. If that's truly what you want, I can draft those terms. But I'm obligated to tell you this is not in your best interest." "I understand." I paused as if gathering courage. "Can you also make sure he assumes all debts associated with those assets?" That got her attention. Her eyes sharpened. "All debts. That's actually smart. If he takes the assets, he takes the liabilities." "Exactly. I'll take $85,000 in cash, personal belongings, joint custody of Riley. He takes everything else, including every debt attached to it." I'll need to prepare a detailed liability disclosure, every debt tied to each asset documented. Perfect, make it thorough. Andrea watched me carefully, something clicking behind her professional expression. She couldn't quite identify what felt off about this consultation, but her instincts were telling her something didn't add up. "I'll draft the agreement," she said slowly. "But Mrs. Ramsey, please reconsider. You deserve so much more than this." I stood, gathering my purse. "I know what I deserve. I also know what I can live with." She walked me to the door, pressed her business card into my hand, even though I already had one. "Call me anytime, day or night, if you change your mind." "Thank you." In the elevator descending 20 floors, I allowed myself a small smile. Andrea thought I was giving up. Derek would think I'd given up. Everyone would think I'd lost before the fight even started. Perfect. I texted Autumn from the lobby. "Hired lawyer. Playing defeated. He'll hear soon." Her response came quickly. "Already celebrating. Says you won't dare fight him." Good, let him celebrate. Overconfidence makes men careless. I stepped out into Portland's drizzle, the kind of persistent rain that's more mist than actual drops, and started apartment hunting. Time to find somewhere small somewhere that looked like struggle. I needed to appear as though I was barely surviving while Derek flourished. The apartment I found was perfect in its imperfection, a 2-bedroom in Southeast Portland with peeling paint in Riley's room and a leaky faucet in mine. The landlord apologized for the conditions offered to fix things before I moved in. "No," I said. "It's fine as is. We'll manage." Within a week, I'd moved us in. Riley tried to be brave about the downgrade from our house from her large bedroom with the bay window to this smaller space with carpet stains. She pretended not to notice. I unpacked our boxes slowly, methodically, making sure anyone who saw us would think struggling single mother barely holding it together. Derek heard about my settlement request from Thomas Hutchins. According to Autumn, who texted me that evening, his reaction was exactly what I'd hoped for. He laughed. Actually laughed out loud, she reported. Said I was making everything too easy for him. Said he couldn't believe his luck getting rid of a wife who was too weak to fight back. He had no idea how right he was about the too easy part. No idea that every asset he was so eager to claim came with liabilities he hadn't bothered to calculate. No idea that the exhausted, defeated woman who'd sat in Andrea Walsh's office that morning had spent 3 years building a trap specifically designed for his overconfidence. Let him laugh. Let him celebrate. Let him think he'd won before the game even started. Men like Derek never saw the trap until it closed around them, and by then, it was always too late. 1 month into our separation, Riley and I had settled into an uncomfortable rhythm in the small apartment. She tried not to complain about the peeling paint in her bedroom or the way the bathroom faucet dripped constantly no matter how many times I tightened it. Her grades had slipped B's, becoming C's, her usual cheerfulness replaced by quiet withdrawal that broke my heart more than Derek's betrayal ever could. I'd started taking freelance work, small residential projects that paid just enough to cover bills and make me look appropriately struggling. Rebuilding my portfolio under my maiden name felt like reclaiming something I'd lost. Pierce Architectural Designs, small, but mine. Each project I signed with my own name was a quiet act of resurrection. Meanwhile, Derek grew more arrogant with every passing day. Autumn reported his conversations with friends. She just gave up, didn't even try to fight. He'd made his relationship with her public posting photos from expensive restaurants captions about new chapters and fresh energy. I ignored social media, but Autumn kept me updated not out of cruelty, but as intelligence. Then one morning, an email arrived from the Oregon Board of Architects. Subject line, "Formal complaint. Professional ethics investigation." My coffee went cold while I read it 3 times each, reading making my chest tighter. An anonymous ethics complaint had been filed against Audrey Pierce Ramsey. The allegations: professional misconduct, plagiarism of architectural designs. Attached evidence showed side-by-side comparisons of my recent freelance work with supposedly similar designs from other architects. Someone claimed I'd been stealing ideas, passing off others' creative work as my own. My license was suspended pending investigation. A hearing was scheduled in 3 weeks. If found guilty, my license would be revoked permanently. My career would be over before it had properly begun. I studied the evidence with growing recognition. These weren't designs from other architects. These were my own designs from 12 years working with derrick buildings I'd created for Ramsey Development. Someone was accusing me of plagiarizing my own work. The irony was vicious. I couldn't prove they were mine because Derek had never credited me. Every file, every approval, every finished building bore his signature, not mine. On paper, I'd never designed anything for Ramsey Development. I'd just been the wife who helped. I called Autumn immediately. Has Derek mentioned anything about architects or ethics boards? Wait, let me check the recordings. She'd been recording Derek's phone calls for months carefully legally in Oregon's one-party consent state. 2 hours later, a file arrived in my encrypted inbox. Derek's voice casual and pleased, talking to Greg Wallace. It's done. Anonymous complaint filed. She'll be too busy defending her license to think about the divorce. Greg's response. What if she figures out it was us? Derek laughed. She won't, and even if she does, she can't prove anything. Anonymous is anonymous. More laughter, then Derek again, finally bearing that dead weight. I sat in my apartment listening to my husband's soon-to-be ex-husband plot my professional destruction with the same tone he used to order coffee. Not angry, not emotional, just efficient, disposing of an inconvenience. Riley was at school. The apartment was silent except for the dripping faucet. I could have panicked. Should have, maybe. Instead, I opened my laptop and started preparing my defense. I spent 2 weeks building my case with the same methodical patience I'd used for 3 years. Retrieved original sketches from my personal archives, drawings I'd kept from every project, dated and signed, stored in a fireproof safe Derek didn't know existed. Found emails from Derek requesting specific design changes, proof I was the one creating while he made demands. Pulled my portfolio from 12 years ago before marriage showing my design aesthetic already fully formed. Then I laid it all out my sketches beside the plagiarized work. They weren't similar, they were identical, because they were the same designs. The board hearing took place in a conference room that smelled like old carpet and anxiety. 3 board members sat behind a table, their expressions professionally neutral. The anonymous complaint was presented first my recent work suspiciously similar to buildings across Portland. Then it was my turn. I laid out my evidence calmly, methodically, letting the work speak. Original sketches next to finished buildings. Emails from Derek Ramsey requesting revisions. My undergraduate portfolio showing the design language I'd used for 12 years. These aren't similar designs, I said quietly. They're the same designs, because I created them. One board member frowned. Why isn't your name on any of the completed projects? I was married to Derek Ramsey. I designed for his company for 12 years. No salary, no credit. He said attribution wasn't necessary in a family business. The board members exchanged looks. One woman's expression shifted from professional neutrality to something closer to anger. Another member, Mr. Ramsey never credited you on a single project. Not once. The board chair leaned forward. This complaint is dismissed. These are clearly your original designs. She paused. We'll be investigating who filed this fraudulent complaint. It was anonymous, I said. We have ways of tracing these things. This is a serious ethical violation, filing false complaints against licensed professionals. Outside the hearing room, I texted Autumn, "Round 1 done. He's going to be furious." Her response came quickly. He already knows. Thomas just called him. Derek threw his phone. I walked to my car with my license intact and my reputation stronger than before. Derek's first attack had backfired spectacularly. The board was now investigating him instead of me. His attempt to destroy my career had inadvertently documented 12 years of him stealing credit for my work, which meant he'd escalate. Men like Derek didn't learn restraint from failure. They learned to hit harder. I was right. Within 2 weeks, he filed for full custody of Riley, claiming I was an unfit mother, unstable, unable to provide proper care, a danger to our daughter's well-being. Using our daughter as a weapon was his first real mistake, because Riley was the one thing I'd fight for with absolutely everything I had. And Derek had just given me legal justification to do exactly that. 2 weeks after my victory at the ethics board, hearing a legal courier delivered papers that made my hands shake in a way Derek's professional sabotage never had. Thomas Hutchins, acting on Derek's behalf, had filed for full custody of Riley. The stated grounds were maternal mental instability and inability to provide a stable environment. The evidence attached was chilling in its calculation. Derek had hired a private investigator weeks earlier, likely right after Riley and I moved into the apartment. The photos told a story deliberately edited to make me appear unstable. Photo 1 showed me sitting alone in my car, my face collapsed in grief. What the image did not show was that I had just received the ethics complaint that morning and had pulled over because my hands were shaking too badly to drive safely. Photo 2 showed me apparently talking to myself while driving, hands gesturing at empty air. In reality, I was speaking on Bluetooth to a client about design specifications, but the frame was cropped to remove any hint of that context. Photo 3 captured me crying outside a coffee shop. It was taken the day the ethics complaint arrived, before I had pulled myself together and decided to fight back. Photo 4 showed me exhausted in a grocery store aisle pushing a cart with exactly 3 items because money was tight and I was buying only what we needed for dinner that night. The investigator's report twisted each image into something sinister. Subject appears socially isolated and emotionally unstable. Subject engages in talking to herself while operating a vehicle. Subject displays signs of depression and anxiety. Subject's residence is small and inadequate for a teenager's needs. Derek's narrative was clear. He presented himself as a concerned father, protecting his daughter from her mother's breakdown. He requested an emergency custody hearing within 3 weeks. That evening, Riley's phone rang. From across our small living room, I heard Derek's voice loud and practiced the voice of a man accustomed to control. "Riley, sweetheart, Dad needs to talk to you about Mom." I watched my daughter's expression shift as he asked questions designed to plant doubt. Was I okay? Did I cry a lot? Did I talk to myself sometimes? They sounded innocent, but each one felt like poison. Riley defended me, saying I was just stressed, but I could see uncertainty settling in. When she hung up, she came to me with eyes too worried for 14. "Dad says you're not doing well. He says I might have to live with him." The pain was sharp and physical. I sat on our secondhand couch and pulled her close. "I'm okay," I told her. "Your dad and I are having grown-up disagreements. This isn't about you." "But you do cry sometimes," she said softly. I chose honesty. "Divorce is hard. I'm sad sometimes. That doesn't mean I can't take care of you." She asked me to promise I was okay. I promised, and I promised I would fight for us. That night, I heard Riley crying behind her door. Her grades slipped further. She started having nightmares about being forced to choose between her parents, about testifying in court. Derek had crossed a line. Using our daughter's fear made his professional sabotage look almost harmless by comparison. The next morning, I called Pete Douglas and asked for counter surveillance on Derek. Everything he could document in 2 weeks. While Pete worked, I built my own record. I pulled Riley's school files. Every conference, every event, every permission slip bore my name. Derek's attendance over the past 3 years was 0. Medical records showed the same pattern. Every appointment, dental visit, therapy session had been handled by me. Derek had not taken Riley to a doctor since she was 10. I gathered receipts for clothing, school supplies, activities, and therapy copays. My calendar showed how often Derek canceled scheduled visits. The frequency was impossible to explain away. I contacted Riley's therapist, Dr. Kira Turner, and requested a statement. Her response was immediate. Riley felt safe with her mother, anxious about her father's inconsistency, and would be harmed by removal from my care. Riley's teachers agreed to provide statements. Each described me as present, reliable, and engaged. None had met Derek in years. He had never attended a play, a parent night, or a science fair. Andrea Walsh prepared our defense with calm precision. She warned me it would get ugly. Derek was painting me as unstable. "Then we paint him accurately," I said. "Absent and manipulative." A week into surveillance, Pete called. His tone was tight. "You need to see this." His photos told another story. Derek leaving bars at 2 in the morning before supposed early inspections. His car drifting slightly between lanes. Derek dining with Autumn at expensive restaurants on nights he told Riley he was working. The timestamps were devastating. On 3 scheduled nights with Riley, Derek was instead ordering bottles of wine that cost more than my monthly rent. Pete also documented Derek's routine visits to a downtown bar called the Ace. Not just evenings, afternoons, nearly every workday. He's there constantly, Pete said. His assistant covers for him. The images showed a man prioritizing indulgence over responsibility. Not a protective father, but an unreliable one. Andrea reviewed the evidence with satisfaction. We were no longer just defending my fitness. We were questioning his. Derek thought staged photos could take my child away. Instead, he exposed himself. In trying to paint me as unfit, he revealed exactly why Riley was safer with me than she would ever be with him. The truth was simple and brutal. Stability is measured in presence, consistency and care, not in curated images or legal theatrics. I had shown up every day, even when broken, even when afraid. Derek had chosen appearances over accountability. The court would see that contrast clearly, and Riley's future would be protected by facts, not fiction. That difference would decide everything for our family. Pete Douglas delivered his surveillance report on a Thursday evening, spreading photos and videos across my small kitchen table, while Riley studied in her room with headphones on. What he documented in 2 weeks was more damning than I'd hoped for a portrait of a man whose life had become a careful performance of responsibility masking complete self-indulgence. Monday through Sunday, Pete said, walking me through the timeline. He's drinking every single night. The pattern was meticulous. Monday at the Ace until 11 p.m., 4 drinks minimum based on Pete's count and the bartender's rhythm. Tuesday business dinner with actual clients, but 3 martinis with the meal enough that his departure showed slight unsteadiness. Wednesday bar with Autumn, both visibly intoxicated, Derek's arm around her waist for balance as they left. Thursday, the Ace again with Greg Wallace staying past midnight. Friday through Sunday, various bars and restaurants, heavy drinking every evening. But the drinking was just context. The driving was criminal. Pete had captured it twice on his dashcam, Derek getting into his car after obvious intoxication, then weaving between lanes with the kind of overcorrection that screamed impairment. Wednesday night, he drifted into the oncoming lane, swerved back just in time to avoid a parked car. Saturday, he'd run a red light, missing a crossing pedestrian by seconds. Blood alcohol was definitely over .08 both times, Pete said. His years as a cop before going private gave that assessment weight. I couldn't stop him without blowing the surveillance, but I called in anonymous tips both nights. Police never caught him. Then there was Riley. Derek had 8 scheduled visits over 2 weeks. He'd kept 2 of them, both times arriving 30 minutes late. The other 6 he'd canceled work emergency. Feeling tired, something came up. Pete had documented where Derek actually was during 3 of those cancellations, twice at the Ace, once at an expensive steakhouse with Autumn. The 2 visits Derek did attend were captured on video. He'd picked Riley up from our apartment, taken her to dinner at a chain restaurant, spent the entire time on his phone. Minimal conversation. No questions about school, friends, her life. They'd been back within 90 minutes. The second visit lasted barely 2 hours, most of it spent at a movie where Derek dozed off halfway through. Riley's disappointment was visible in every frame her shoulders hunched her attempts at conversation, dying against his distraction, her quiet resignation as he checked his watch repeatedly. "There's more," Pete said, pulling up audio files. "He's fighting with Autumn, publicly, twice in bars where I could record clearly." The recordings caught Derek being dismissive, cruel even. In one, he was openly flirting with another woman while Autumn sat beside him, her discomfort obvious even as she maintained her cover. She was still playing her role, but Derek was making it harder every day. Bottom line, Pete concluded, he's a functioning alcoholic with a dangerous driving habit and 0 real interest in his kid. Any judge who sees this will question his fitness. Andrea Walsh organized Pete's findings into a narrative for family court. Judge Diane Porter was scheduled to hear our case in 2 weeks, 9 a.m. formal setting, both parents present. Andrea assembled our witness list carefully. Ms. Rodriguez Riley's teacher, who'd never met Derek, despite teaching her for 3 years. Dr. James Riley's pediatrician since birth, who confirmed that Audrey brought her to every appointment, while Derek had attended exactly 0. Dr. Turner, whose written statement about Riley's anxiety regarding her father was clinically precise and devastating. I contributed my own documentation, 3 years of calendar entries, showing every school event, medical appointment, extracurricular activity. Green check marks beside my name hundreds of times. Red X's beside Derek's name. Not one green mark in 3 years. I cross-referenced Derek's work calendar accessed through Autumn's discrete photography of his desktop screen. The correlation was damning. Business meetings, scheduled at exactly the times of Riley's school plays, parent-teacher conferences, soccer games. When matched against Autumn's intelligence, many of those meetings were actually afternoons at the Ace, or dinners that had nothing to do with clients. Derek's credit card statements subpoenaed by Andrea showed the same pattern. Hundreds charged at bars, not business expenses, despite being claimed as such. Restaurant bills too expensive and too frequent to be legitimate client entertainment. The morning of the hearing, Derek arrived in an expensive suit playing the concerned father perfectly. Thomas Hutchins presented their case first, the PI photos of me looking unstable, Derek's testimony about his worry for Riley's well-being in her mother's care. "I love my daughter," Derek said with practiced sincerity. "I just want what's best for her. Her mother isn't herself anymore." Thomas asked the setup question, "Mr. Ramsey, how often do you see Riley?" "As often as her mother allows. I try for every week." Andrea's cross-examination was surgical. "Mr. Ramsey, you had 8 scheduled visits with Riley over the past 2 weeks. How many did you attend?" Derek shifted slightly. "My work demands are considerable." 2. You attended exactly 2 visits. Isn't that correct?" "Sometimes emergencies arise." Andrea pulled up the video on a courtroom monitor, Derek at the Ace on a night he'd canceled due to a work emergency. The timestamp matched perfectly. The bartender serving him his 3rd bourbon. "This emergency?" Andrea asked mildly. Derek's face flushed. Thomas objected on procedural grounds, but Judge Porter waved him off. She was watching Derek with an expression that had shifted from neutral to skeptical. "When I testified, I kept my voice calm and factual. I attend every school event, every medical appointment, every parent-teacher conference." I showed the 3-year calendar. Let the green checkmarks speak for themselves. Our character witnesses testified in sequence. "Ms. Rodriguez, I've taught Riley for 3 years. I've met her mother dozens of times. I've never met her father. Dr. James. Audrey brings Riley to every appointment. Derek has attended 0 in 4 years. Dr. Turner." Riley expresses significant anxiety about her father's inconsistency and unpredictability. She feels safe with her mother. Judge Porter reviewed the documentation in silence that stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, she looked at Derek. "Mr. Ramsey, this appears to be a tactical filing rather than genuine concern for your daughter's welfare." Derek tried to recover. "I am concerned. I love my daughter." "Then perhaps you should attend her school events. Show up for your scheduled visits." The ruling came swift and decisive. Custody remained with me. Derek's visitation would be supervised until he could demonstrate consistent participation in Riley's life. A court-appointed supervisor would be present for all visits, documenting his attendance and interaction quality. Derek's face went from shock to fury to humiliation in seconds. Thomas tried to object to request reconsideration. Judge Porter cut him off. "I've made my ruling, Mr. Hutchins. Your client's behavior speaks clearly enough." Outside the courtroom, Derek intercepted me in the hallway. His face was tight with rage, barely contained. "You turned them against me." I met his eyes calmly. "No, Derek. You did that yourself." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Because he knew it was true. Every piece of evidence we'd presented was his own action, his own choice. I hadn't fabricated anything. I'd just documented reality. He turned away without another word, Thomas trailing after him with a briefcase full of useless objections. That evening, after Riley was asleep, my burner phone buzzed with a text from Autumn. He's drinking heavier, angrier, talking about making problems disappear. I stared at that message, feeling the first real chill of warning. Derek had lost twice now the ethics board, the custody hearing. His professional sabotage had backfired. His attempt to weaponize Riley had failed spectacularly. Men like Derek didn't take losing well. They escalated. They got desperate. They stopped calculating risks and started taking them. I didn't know yet that his threat about making problems disappear was literal, that he'd already started planning something more dangerous than professional attacks or custody battles. I was about to find out exactly how far he was willing to go. 1 week after the custody hearing, on an ordinary Tuesday morning soaked in Portland's signature spring rain, I woke at 6 to make Riley breakfast. She sat at our small kitchen table studying for a math test, her face tight with the kind of anxiety that made my heart ache. "What if I fail this test?" she asked, pencil tapping nervously against her notebook. "You won't fail. You've studied hard. I'm proud of you." She looked up, and for a moment she was just my little girl again, not the teenager navigating her parents' war. "Thanks, Mom. I love you." "I love you more, sweetheart." I dropped her at Roosevelt High at 7:45. She waved from the school steps, backpack bouncing against her shoulders as she ran to meet friends. A moment so mundane and ordinary and beautiful that it would replay in my mind for months afterward. My client meeting was downtown at 9, enough time to grab coffee and review my presentation one more time. The Honda Accord started with its usual reliable rumble. Nothing fancy about this car, just transportation that got me where I needed to go. I set my coffee in the cup holder, laid my presentation folder on the passenger seat, found a jazz station on the radio. Everything was normal. Highway 26 westbound toward downtown was moderately busy for morning rush hour traffic flowing at about 60 miles per hour. I signaled right as I approached the Burnside exit, moved into the exit lane, pressed the brake pedal to slow for the curve. Nothing happened. The pedal went straight to the floor. No resistance, no friction, no slowing. The car kept moving at 60 miles per hour toward a curve rated for 25. My first thought was confusion. Did I miss the pedal? My foot slipped. I tried again, pressed harder, still nothing. The brake pedal was just a piece of metal connected to nothing, accomplishing nothing. Cars ahead were slowing for a red light at the bottom of the exit ramp. I had maybe 3 seconds to make a choice that would determine whether I lived or died. Option A, slam into the cars ahead. Certain collision likely fatal at this speed differential. Option B, aim for the shoulder. Try to scrub off speed against something that wasn't another vehicle full of people. I grabbed the emergency brake, yanked it hard. The car slowed slightly, the parking brake engaging rear wheels, creating some drag, but not enough. Still going 45 miles per hour into a curve designed for 25 with stopped traffic ahead. I made the decision in a fraction of a second. Cranked the wheel, right aiming for the guardrail along the exit ramp's shoulder. The car's right side caught the metal barrier with a scream of tearing metal and sparking friction. The passenger side scraped along the guardrail paint, peeling away in strips, the horrible sound of my car being destroyed, drowning out everything else. I fought the wheel with both hands, knuckles white, trying to keep the car from spinning out or flipping. Coffee exploded across the dashboard. Papers flew. But I stayed focused on the single task that mattered, surviving. Physics worked in my favor. The friction against the guardrail bled off speed. After what felt like hours but was probably 30 seconds, the car finally stopped on the shoulder about 500 feet past where I'd first lost the brakes. My hands were locked on the steering wheel, breath coming in gasps. I couldn't move, couldn't process. Just sat there while adrenaline flooded my system and made everything simultaneously sharp and distant. Other cars passed, some slowing to check. One stopped a man in a work truck, his window rolling down. "Are you okay?" I couldn't speak, just nodded. Not okay, but alive. He drove on. I sat frozen for 5 minutes, maybe longer, staring at my hands, still gripping the wheel. My phone rang, Riley's number. I forced myself to answer. "Hey, sweetie. Just checking. You're still picking me up at 3, right?" "Yes, absolutely. I'll be there." My voice shook. "Mom, you sound weird. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, honey. Just a busy morning. Love you." I hung up and broke down crying, sobbing in my wrecked car on the side of Highway 26 while Portland morning traffic streamed past. The reality hit me like a second collision. Someone had tried to kill me. My instinct was to call 911, report the brake failure, get police involved. My hand was reaching for my phone when clarity cut through the fear. This wasn't an accident. Brakes don't fail completely without warning on a well-maintained vehicle. Someone had sabotaged my car, and I knew who had given the order. Derek had just lost custody, lost the ethics complaint, lost control of the narrative. Autumn had warned me he was drinking heavier, talking about making problems disappear. If I called police now, there would be an investigation. Questions. Time. Derek would hear about it through official channels, could destroy evidence, establish an alibi, muddy the timeline. Better to control the investigation myself. I called Pete Douglas instead. "Where are you?" "Office. What's wrong? Your voice." "Someone sabotaged my car. I almost died. I need you now." "Stay there. Don't talk to anyone. I'm coming." I texted Autumn on the burner phone. "Can't explain now. Watch Derek today. Record everything." Her response came quickly. "What happened?" "Later. Just watch him." 20 minutes later, Pete arrived with a flatbed tow truck. His friend Vince Harper, mechanic, ex-Marine, someone Pete trusted, absolutely climbed out and assessed my car with professional eyes. "We'll take it to my shop," Vince said. "Quiet? No insurance reports yet?" Pete looked at me carefully. "You're sure this was sabotage?" "I'm certain, and I know who ordered it." I rode in Pete's truck to Vince's shop, watching my damaged Honda being towed behind us. The scrapes along the passenger side told one story, the story of me barely surviving a highway collision with a guardrail. What we were about to find underneath the car would tell another story entirely. One about deliberate tampering, about brake lines cut with precision, about a man desperate enough to commit murder rather than accept defeat. Vince had been a mechanic for 35 years. He'd seen brake failures from wear and tear, from neglect, from manufacturing defects. He'd also seen sabotage. Within an hour, he'd confirmed which category this fell into. And once we had that confirmation, once we had photographic evidence of exactly what had been done to my car, Derek wouldn't just be facing a divorce. He'd be facing charges that could send him to prison for 20 years. Vince Harper's garage occupied a corner of an industrial district in southeast Portland. Small, impeccably clean tools, organized with military precision. The Honda sat on a hydraulic lift passenger side, still scraped raw from the guardrail, a monument to how close I'd come to not walking out of that shop alive. Vince disappeared under the car with a work light examining the brake system while Pete and I waited in his small office. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with motor oil. A calendar on the wall showed March the 15th circled in red today, the day someone tried to murder me. 30 minutes later, Vince emerged, his expression grim. He wiped his hands on a rag. "Come look at this." Under the car, he pointed to the brake line with one gloved finger. This was cut. Not worn, not corroded. Cut. The line ran along the frame, a rubber hose carrying hydraulic fluid from the master cylinder to the brake calipers. Vince indicated a spot where the rubber showed a clean slice, not all the way through, but deep enough to matter. "See this brake line? Cut about 70% through." Pete frowned. "Why not cut it completely?" "That's the signature of someone who knows what they're doing. Cut it all the way through the fluid drains immediately. You'd notice, as soon as you backed out of your parking space, pedal would go straight to the floor." Vince traced the cut with his finger, not touching, just showing. "Partial cut like this. Fluid leaks slowly. First few brake applications feel normal, then pressure drops gradually. By the time you really need to stop..." "There's nothing left," I finished. "Nothing. Whoever did this knew exactly where to cut and how deep. This wasn't amateur work." He took photographs from multiple angles, documenting everything with the kind of thoroughness that suggested he'd testified in court before. This happened within the last 24 hours. Brake fluid under your parking spot is still fresh, hasn't evaporated or been washed away by rain. My apartment building had underground parking. The only place my car sat overnight without supervision, without security cameras, pointing directly at the vehicles. "You need to call the police," Vince said. "This is attempted murder." Pete glanced at me. "We will, but first we need to know who." Pete made 3 calls building manager police contacts favors owed. Within an hour, we had emergency access to my apartment building's security system. The manager cooperated immediately, genuinely concerned about a resident's safety being compromised in his building. The security office was a small room lined with monitors, recording equipment humming quietly. We reviewed footage from the underground parking garage looking at March 14th, the night before my brake failure. Hours of nothing. Cars coming and going, residents parking, leaving, returning. Normal activity. Then at 2:17 a.m., movement caught the camera. A figure emerged from the stairwell door, male average build wearing a dark hoodie. He walked directly to my car, knew exactly which one, without searching, without hesitation. He looked around, first checking for witnesses, aware of camera positions, but not quite careful enough. Then he crouched beside the driver's side front wheel, disappearing from the camera's optimal view, but not completely out of frame. For 14 minutes, the timestamp showed the duration. Clearly he worked underneath. A small flashlight, visible tools in hand. Professional, methodical. Someone who'd done mechanical work before. When he stood up, he checked his surroundings again. Turned toward the camera for just a moment. The hood shadowed most of his face, but not all of it. A partial profile, grainy but visible. "Back it up," I said. "Stop there." The image froze. My heart recognized him before my brain fully processed the features. "I know him." "Who?" Pete asked. "Brett Palmer. Works for Derek. Has for 5 years." Pete pulled up information on his phone. Brett Palmer, 36 years old, construction supervisor. Worked on Ramsey development projects. Not just an employee, a friend, a drinking buddy loyal to Derek in ways that went beyond a paycheck. "We've got him," Pete said. "FaceTime stamp intent. This is conspiracy." We copied the footage to 3 USB drives. One for police eventually, one for Andrea Walsh, one for the safe deposit box at my bank insurance against anything happening to the other copies. While we were still at the building, my burner phone buzzed. "Autumn. Call me now. Derek's drunk. He just said something." I stepped outside, called her back. She was whispering from a bathroom. "I recorded him earlier. Phone call with Brett this morning." The audio file arrived seconds later. Pete and I listened together, standing in the parking garage where Brett had sabotaged my car. Derek's voice slightly slurred. "Is it done?" Brett. "Yeah, like you said. She won't see it coming." Derek. "Good. Had to look like an accident. Brake failure. Old cars have problems sometimes." Brett. "What if someone checks?" Derek laughed the sound ugly. "Who's going to check? She's broke. Can't afford a forensic examination of a wrecked car. She'll just think she got unlucky." Silence on the recording. Then Derek again. "She's destroying everything, Brett. My company, my reputation. She needs to disappear." Brett's voice uncertain. "You sure about this?" "This is serious. I didn't tell you to kill her. I told you to make the problem go away. How you interpret that is up to you." The recording ended. Legal hedge. Derek never explicitly said, "kill her." Just make the problem go away language designed to create plausible deniability if this ever came to light. But combined with Brett's action, with the cut brake line, with my near death on the highway, intent was crystal clear. This was conspiracy to commit murder even if Derek tried to hide behind careful phrasing. I had everything now. Physical evidence, the cut brake line. Video evidence, Brett at my car. Audio evidence, Derek's order, however carefully worded. My own survival as witness to the attempt. "This is attempted murder," Pete said. "We call police now. They arrest Derek and Brett tonight." "No." Pete stared at me. "What? Why?" "Because in 2 weeks I'm divorcing him. If he's arrested now, the divorce gets delayed for years while criminal proceedings drag on." I kept my voice steady, clinical thinking, 3 steps ahead the way I'd learned to do over 3 years of preparation. Better let him think he got away with it. Finish the divorce first. Get everything finalized, then bring criminal charges. That's risky. What if he tries again? He won't. He thinks this work scared me away, made me too frightened to fight. And in 2 weeks, he'll be too busy dealing with much bigger problems. I looked at the security footage still frozen on Pete's phone screen. Brett Palmer's face partially visible. Derek's voice on the recording ordering my death in language he thought was clever enough to protect him. They'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed I was weak, that I'd run scared. That attempted murder would break me the way professional sabotage and custody battles hadn't. They didn't understand that every attack just made me more determined. Every escalation just gave me more ammunition. Every crime they committed just built my case stronger. We left Vince's shop with evidence that could send Derek to prison for 20 years. But I wasn't ready to use it yet. First, I needed Derek to sign away everything in divorce court thinking he was getting what he wanted. Then I'd show him what he'd actually signed up for. Andrea Walsh thought I was insane when I explained this plan later that evening. Someone just tried to kill you and you want to wait? Yes. Oh, why? Because Derek's biggest weakness isn't his crimes. It's his ego. He thinks he's smarter than everyone else. Thinks he can manipulate any situation. Thinks I'm just a frightened ex-wife he can intimidate into submission. I pulled up the divorce settlement terms on my laptop, the ones he'd agreed to so readily, because he thought I was giving up accepting defeat. In 2 weeks, he's going to walk into that courtroom absolutely certain he's won, that he's taken everything and left me with nothing, that he's finally free of me. 1 week after the car incident, I met with Andrea in her office to finalize our mediation strategy. She closed the door, poured 2 cups of coffee, and studied me with the expression of a lawyer watching her client make an inexplicable decision. You're absolutely certain you don't want to report the car tampering. Not yet. It's leverage for after the divorce. She was skeptical. Every instinct in her professional body said, call the police when someone tries to murder you. But she was learning to trust that I'd thought this through more carefully than most clients thought anything through. I explained the strategy one more time. Derek thought he'd gotten away with attempted murder. He'd be supremely confident at mediation, certain that the car incident had broken my spirit. Overconfidence made people careless, made them sign documents without reading carefully, made them dismiss their lawyer's advice because they thought they knew better. What if he demands a financial audit? Andrea asked. He won't. Thomas will recommend it. Derek will refuse. How can you be so sure? Because men like Derek don't listen to anyone, especially when they think they're winning. We reviewed the mediation tactics one final time. I would play the defeated wife, exhausted, broken, giving up, ask for minimal settlement so Derek felt generous, show no fight, make everything seem easy. This goes against every lawyer instinct I have, Andrea said. Trust me, I've been planning this for 3 years. She saw something shift in my expression, understood finally that this wasn't defeat. This was strategy at a level most people never achieved. 2 weeks after my near death on Highway 26, we gathered for mandatory mediation in Joyce Perry's downtown office. Professional building conference room, late afternoon light slanting through windows. Joyce was a seasoned mediator who'd seen hundreds of divorces, maintained careful neutrality as her livelihood. Derek arrived looking confident, almost cheerful. Autumn had texted me that morning. He thinks you're terrified, thinks the car incident broke your will. Perfect. Joyce opened with standard language about finding agreement both parties could accept. Thomas Hutchins presented Derek's position first. Derek would keep the house, the company, all 12 properties, both cars. Audrey would receive $75,000 in cash personal belongings. Custody joint per the previous court order. Derek leaned back in his chair, voice magnanimous. I want to be fair. Let's make this easy for everyone. Andrea presented my counteroffer. $85,000 cash, just $10,000 more. Personal belongings, including my grandmother's recipe box. Joint custody of Riley. That was it. No fight for the company. I'd built the house. I'd maintained the properties I'd designed. Joyce looked genuinely surprised. Mrs. Ramsey, you helped build that company for 12 years. You're entitled to significantly more. I let my shoulders slump, kept my voice small. I just want peace. I want to move forward. I want Riley out of this conflict. Eyes down, exhaustion radiating from every line of my body. An Oscar-worthy performance 3 years in the making. Derek jumped on it immediately. See, she's being reasonable. I agree to the 85. Thomas leaned in, whispering urgently. Derek, we should review this more carefully. Derek waved him off. Not necessary, let's finish this. Joyce drafted the preliminary agreement. Thomas tried again, professional concern evident. Mr. Ramsey, I strongly advise you to order an independent financial audit before signing. Thomas, I know my own company. I know what I own. This is my life, my business. But the liability disclosure, I can handle my own debts. That's why I'm keeping everything. He pulled out a waiver form. Client declines recommended financial review. Derek signed it without reading confident scrawl across the bottom. I watched him sign away his future with the same carelessness. He'd signed everything for 12 years, assuming he knew better, assuming he was in control, assuming I was just the stupid wife who'd never understand business. Both parties agree to these terms, Joyce asked. Yes, I said softly. Yes, finally done. Derek's relief was palpable. Final court date is April 22nd. At that point, it's just formality. Professional handshakes, civil farewell. Derek spoke to me as he stood to leave, voice low enough the mediator couldn't quite hear. Glad you came to your senses. Starting over will be good for you. I kept my eyes down, voice meek. Thank you, Derek. He walked out, Thomas trailing behind, still looking worried, understanding. Somewhere in his legal instincts that something felt wrong, but unable to identify exactly what. The conference room door closed. Andrea turned to me and I let the performance drop. Stood straighter, smiled. You played him, Andrea said. He played himself. I just let him think he was winning. That waiver he signed means when he discovers the debts, he can't claim he wasn't warned. He refused professional advice in writing. Documented. Andrea's smile grew slowly as understanding bloomed. How long have you been planning this? 3 years. Every detail, every document, every contingency. I've practiced law for 28 years. I've never seen anything like this. April 22nd. It all comes together then. My burner phone buzzed. Autumn. He's celebrating. Taking me to expensive dinner. Says you finally saw reason. I texted back, let him celebrate 2 weeks. In the parking garage, I got into my rental car. Insurance was handling repairs on the Accord would be weeks before it was drivable again. I tested the brakes carefully before backing out. They worked perfectly. 2 more weeks until court. 2 more weeks until justice. 2 more weeks of Derek thinking he'd won, celebrating his victory, believing he'd successfully intimidated me into submission. He thought the danger had passed. Thought he'd escaped consequences for attempted murder because I hadn't reported it. Thought the car incident had worked exactly as planned, scared me into accepting whatever he offered just to make everything stop. He had no idea the danger was just beginning. That every day between now and April 22nd was another day he spent walking deeper into the trap I'd spent 3 years constructing. I drove home carefully, checking mirrors constantly. Not because I feared another attack Derek thought he'd won would have no reason to escalate now, but because caution had become habit. Because surviving 3 years of this had taught me to never assume safety. Those final 2 weeks crawled by with excruciating slowness. But I'd waited 3 years. I could wait 14 more days. April 22nd arrived with spring rain and the end of Derek Ramsey's world as he knew it. He just didn't know it yet. The alarm went off at 5 a.m., but I'd been awake since 3. Not from anxiety, from anticipation. 3 years of planning would culminate today. Every document, every strategy, every carefully laid trap would spring in a matter of hours. I sat at my small kitchen table reviewing files one final time. Asset transfer agreements, Derek taking everything. Liability disclosure addendum, Derek assuming all debts. Settlement terms, $85,000 for me. A separate folder prepared for afterward the criminal evidence. Photos of the cut brake line, security footage of Brett Palmer, Derek's recorded phone call, Mark Sullivan's building inspection reports. Everything organized, labeled, backed up in 3 locations. Riley was still asleep in her room. I wrote a note and left it on the kitchen counter. Mom's in court this morning. Home before lunch. Pizza tonight. Love you forever. Mom. I showered and dressed with deliberate care. Navy blue suit, not expensive, but professional, the kind a struggling single mother might afford. Minimal jewelry, just my grandmother's pearl necklace. Hair pulled back in a neat bun. Makeup kept light just enough to look presentable, not enough to suggest confidence or triumph. I wanted to look defeated, exhausted, like someone who'd given up fighting, not angry, not vengeful, not calculating. At 7 a.m., I texted Autumn, "It's today." Her response, "I'll be there, in the hallway, waiting for the reveal." For Logan. Spring rain fell gently as I climbed the steps of the Multnomah County Courthouse at 8:30. Cherry blossoms lined the walkway, blooming despite the weather, Portland in April beautiful and melancholy at once. Andrea waited at the entrance in her professional armor sharpsuit leather briefcase, the bearing of a lawyer who'd won more cases than she'd lost. "Morning, ready." I've been ready for 3 years. We reviewed strategy one final time in whispered conversation as we moved through security. Let Derek sign everything first. Show no satisfaction. Stay quiet, compliant. After the judge finalized everything, then the revelations could begin. "Mark Sullivan's here," Andrea said quietly, with his report. Perfect timing. "I still can't believe you waited this long." Patience isn't passivity, it's tactics. The courthouse had become familiar after multiple hearings, custody battles, mediation sessions. But today felt different. Today was the finale. Elevator to the 4th floor, courtroom 4B, the moment I'd been working toward for 3 years. And that brought me back to where this story began, standing in that courtroom on April 22nd, watching Derek Ramsey sign document after document with absolute confidence, completely unaware he was signing his own destruction. The building inspector's hands trembled as he read the report. Across the mahogany desk, my ex-husband, now the ink barely dry on our divorce decree, turned pale. That confident, smug face I'd watched for 12 years suddenly drained of color. His lawyer leaned in close, whispered something that made Derek's eyes go wide with panic. And for the first time in 3 years, I allowed myself to smile. If you're still watching, please comment "justice" so I know you're still here with me. Derek just signed every document with a triumphant smile. But what's about to happen in the next few minutes will change everything. Please note, the following part of my story contains some dramatized elements for educational purposes. If you'd prefer not to continue, you can stop the video right here. The court clerk distributed final documents, multiple copies requiring multiple signatures. Derek reached for his pen with the eagerness of a man who thought he'd won everything. Page 1, transfer of primary residence. His signature flowed confidently across the line. Page 3, transfer of business ownership. He signed with a flourish, claiming Ramsey Development entirely as his. Page 5, transfer of real property, all 12 buildings. Quick strokes, barely pausing. Page 7, vehicle titles. Careless scrawl, rushing to finish. Each signature established his ownership of an empire he thought was his triumph. What he didn't see, what he'd refused to see despite 3 warnings from Thomas, was that he was signing away his future. I watched him claim everything with the satisfaction of someone who'd spent 3 years preparing for exactly this moment. Thomas read ahead while Derek signed. When he reached the liability disclosure addendum, 30 pages Derek had waved off at mediation, Thomas's face went bloodless. He flipped pages, faster, confusion shifting to comprehension, then horror. Derek kept signing, oblivious, enthusiastic. I signed my own documents with deliberate care. Calm, methodical reading each line for appearance's sake, though I'd memorized every word months ago. The settlement agreement acknowledging I'd receive $85,000 in personal belongings. The custody arrangement confirming joint custody would continue. The asset waiver confirming I claim no interest in properties, business, or vehicles. Each signature another step toward freedom. Thomas leaned over, whispered urgently, Derek, stop." Derek didn't look up, annoyed at the interruption. "What? We're almost done." "The liability disclosure. Have you read this?" "I know what I own, Thomas." "But the debts." Derek waved him off. "Operating expenses. I can handle them." He signed the final page with an elaborate flourish, the signature of a man who thought he'd won. I signed my final page. Both of us finished. Judge Bennett looked up. "Both parties have executed all documents." Thomas stood quickly. "Your Honor, if I could have just a moment." "Any objections, Mr. Hutchins?" Thomas looked at Derek, who was smiling with complete satisfaction. Thomas understood what was coming, knew his client wouldn't listen, knew he'd be blamed later anyway. "No objection, Your Honor." His voice carried defeat. Judge Bennett's gavel came down with decisive finality. Divorce is granted. Mr. Ramsey assumes all assets as specified. Mrs. Ramsey receives settlement as agreed. Court is adjourned. Derek exhaled with relief. Victory complete and total. I remained still, calm. Thomas frantically read the liability disclosure, his face growing paler with each page. The courtroom began to empty. Derek stood ready to leave, ready to celebrate. Thomas grabbed his arm. "Derek, we need to talk, right now." "About what?" Thomas read aloud from the disclosure, his voice rising with each line. "Primary residence outstanding mortgage of $1.1 million. Current market value $850,000. Negative equity $250,000. Derek's smile faltered. Commercial properties, total debt of $2.3 million. Total market value $1.8 million. Business operating loans $800,000. Pending vendor lawsuits $300,000. Equipment and design fees $150,000. Total liabilities assumed $3.55 million. Total asset value $1.8 million. Thomas looked up from the papers, his voice flat. Net position negative $1.75 million. Derek stared at him. "That can't be right." "It's all here, documented. You just signed personal responsibility for all of it." Derek turned to me, voice rising. You knew about this." I stood gathering my documents calmly. "I was your bookkeeper for 12 years, Derek. I knew everything. This is fraud. You hid this from me." Judge Bennett, still at the bench, spoke with judicial authority. "Mr. Ramsey, these are your properties, your business, your debts. I want to revoke the agreement." "Too late. It's finalized. You had legal representation." Derek spun toward Thomas. "You should have caught this." Thomas pulled out a document, held it up. "I recommended a financial audit 3 times. You refused. I have your signed waiver right here." He showed the waiver from mediation. Derek's signature dated witnessed. The document where he declined recommended professional review. Derek read it, recognition dawning. He'd signed away his right to complain. Thomas spoke quietly. "You were warned. You chose not to listen." I watched Derek's face cycle through emotions, confusion, anger, fear, realization, the truth landing like a physical blow. He hadn't won. He'd lost everything, and I'd given him exactly what he demanded, everything, including the consequences. Derek collapsed into his chair, papers scattering. I collected my documents, prepared to leave. "Audrey, wait." His voice broke with desperation. "We can renegotiate this." I stopped, looked at him. For 12 years, my husband. For 3 months, my enemy. Now a broken man who'd destroyed himself. "You wanted everything," I said softly. "You got it." I turned toward the door. "Please, I didn't know it was this bad. Help me fix this." I paused at the courtroom door, looked back one final time. "You had 3 years to fix things. Instead, you cut corners, bribed inspectors, tried to destroy my career, weaponized our daughter, and tried to kill me. I never ordered." Brett Palmer, March 14th, 2 a.m. My break line. "I have footage. I have your recording. Make the problem go away." Derek's face showed absolute horror. Thomas's head snapped toward his client. "What is she talking about?" Thomas demanded. I spoke to Thomas, not Derek. "Ask your client about conspiracy to commit murder or wait for the detectives." I walked out. Behind me, Derek's voice rising in panic, Thomas demanding explanations, chaos erupting. I stepped into the courthouse hallway and took the first deep breath I'd managed in 3 years. Behind me, Derek's world collapsed. Ahead of me, a larger justice waited. Autumn stood in the hallway exactly where she'd promised. Behind her, Mark Sullivan with his building inspection report. Derek thought losing money was the worst thing that could happen. He had no idea. I stepped out of the courtroom with the feeling of taking my first full breath in 3 years, the hallway light streaming across my steady footsteps. Andrea gently touched my arm with a knowing smile, then turned toward the offices to finalize the paperwork. I wasn't in a hurry. 3 years of meticulous planning had brought me to this moment, and now that moment belonged entirely to me. Ahead, Autumn Sterling leaned against the cold brick wall of the hallway, her eyes fixed on the courtroom door with the patience forged over 18 months of playing Derek Ramsey's lover. She wore a simple black dress, nothing elaborate, but what caught my attention most was the thin silver necklace she always wore when she was with Derek Logan Sterling's necklace, her brother's, who had died at 23 in the apartment at 47 Riverside Drive that Derek owned and left riddled with serious building code violations. Throughout that entire time, Derek had no idea that the woman sleeping beside him each night was recording every word, every drunken conversation about cutting construction corners and bribing inspectors. The courtroom door burst open with a crash. Derek staggered out, his face ashen like cold ashes, his expensive Armani suit now a meaningless shell before the truth that had been unveiled. He stopped when he saw Autumn, his eyes widening with disbelief. Thomas Hutchins followed behind with a tense expression, clutching his leather briefcase as if it weighed more than ever, but he didn't dare say anything. Derek looked at Autumn, his voice trembling. What are you doing here?" Autumn pushed away from the wall, stepping closer to him, with eyes cold and stripped of all pretense. She said, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. "My name is Autumn Sterling, sister of Logan Sterling, who died in the apartment at 47 Riverside Drive 3 years ago. Do you remember Logan? He was 23 years old. He died of carbon monoxide poisoning in an apartment with a broken ventilation system that you never fixed." Derek stepped back, his face pale. You can't—" Autumn didn't let him finish. She continued, her voice unwavering. "I've been with you for 18 months, Derek. 18 months recording every drunken conversation you had about cutting construction materials, about paying Gary Mitchell to approve substandard buildings, about covering up the truth when people died in your apartments. Every night I wore this necklace, Logan's necklace, to remind myself why I was there. And now every one of those conversations, every drunken confession, every piece of evidence of your fraud is in Audrey's hands." Derek turned to look at me, his eyes filled with rage and terror. "You orchestrated all of this. You planned every single step." I stepped forward, standing next to Autumn, the two of us a united front against our common enemy. I said, my voice cold, "Not orchestrated, Derek, it's justice. You used me for 12 years to build your empire. You exploited my talent, stole my work, and erased my name from every project. You even tried to kill me by cutting my brake lines. And Autumn, you took her brother. Now we've taken back everything you stole." Derek stepped back again, his hand trembling as he gripped the hallway railing. "This isn't over. Thomas placed a hand on his shoulder, interrupting. "Derek, don't say another word. We need to leave now." But before Derek could move, Mark Sullivan appeared from the end of the hallway carrying a thick folder. Mark Sullivan was Portland's senior building inspector who had begun a quiet investigation after receiving an anonymous tip in 2022. That tip had been from me. He approached, his stern gaze sweeping across Derek and Thomas, then stopping before Derek. He said, his authoritative voice devoid of emotion, "Mr. Derek Ramsey, I'm Mark Sullivan, senior building inspector. I have an investigation report on 12 properties owned by Ramsey Development. This report documents a total of 47 separate building code violations, including but not limited to the use of substandard materials, lack of proper ventilation systems, fire safety regulation violations, and other serious infractions that have endangered the lives of residents." Mark opened the folder, continuing, "The apartment at 47 Riverside Drive has 8 separate violations, including a broken ventilation system and lack of carbon monoxide detectors, violations that were documented by independent contractors, but were approved by Gary Mitchell, a building inspector. Despite warnings, we verified that you paid $47,000 to Mr. Mitchell over 4 years in the form of consulting fees to ensure your buildings were approved without necessary repairs. Harborview Apartments have 6 violations related to electrical systems and waterproofing. Powell Street Apartments have 5 violations concerning foundation structure and insulation. In total, your 12 properties have 47 serious violations, and you are the sole legal owner of all these buildings, according to the asset transfer documents you signed this morning. Derek's mouth hung open, unable to form any words. Thomas stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Inspector Sullivan, we need time to review this report." Mark interrupted, his voice resolute. "There is no time, Attorney Hutchins. The District Attorney's Office has opened a criminal investigation based on this report and additional evidence. Mr. Ramsey will face charges including fraud, bribery of public officials, reckless endangerment, and possibly involuntary manslaughter if a direct connection can be proven between the violations and the death of Mr. Logan Sterling. The sentence for fraud and bribery is 5 to 10 years in prison. If the court convicts you in connection with Logan Sterling's death, the sentence could reach 15 to 20 years. The official investigation will begin next week, and I advise you to find a good criminal defense attorney." Mark closed the folder, handed Thomas a copy, then turned and walked away. The courthouse hallway fell silent, only Derek's ragged breathing and Mark Sullivan's footsteps echoing in the distance remained. Derek turned to me, his face filled with desperation. "You can't do this. You can't." I didn't need to say anything more. I had said enough. Autumn and I turned our backs, walking toward the courthouse exit, leaving Derek standing alone in the hallway with the papers documenting $1,750,000 in debt and the inspection report listing 47 serious building code violations. Thomas still stood there, but even he didn't dare look at Derek. Everything Derek had built Reputation Empire Control had now completely collapsed in a single April morning. 12 years of construction, 12 years of exploitation and manipulation, all destroyed by 2 women he had once dismissed. As I pushed open the courthouse door, the April sunlight streamed down, the rain had stopped, and Portland's sky was clear as crystal. Autumn walked beside me, the two of us silently descending the granite steps, feeling the breath of freedom for the first time after months of living in fear and calculation. That was 3 months ago. Today, Derek Ramsey begins his criminal trial, and me, I'm beginning my new life. October sunlight streamed through the large windows of my new office on the second floor of a brick building in downtown Portland, illuminating the drafting table where I sat reviewing blueprints for a residential redesign project. The business card on my desk read, "Audrey Pierce, Principal Architect." My maiden name restored my identity, reclaimed after 12 years of erasure. Pierce Architecture Studio was modest but professional. A drafting station by the window, a computer workstation, a small client reception area, and a portfolio wall displaying current projects, every single one bearing my name. I had 2 employees, a junior architect, fresh out of graduate school, and an administrative assistant who managed scheduling and client communications. This wasn't an empire built on exploitation and debt. This was a sustainable business built on honesty, transparency, and the simple principle that good work deserves proper recognition. My specialty had become redesigning homes for people rebuilding their lives, and my first client had been Sandra, a 52-year-old woman who had divorced after 28 years of marriage. I helped her redesign her apartment, transforming the kitchen with soft blue-gray paint, a color that had become my signature, representing calm after chaos. When Sandra saw the finished space, she cried tears of happiness and said, "This place feels like hope." Word spread quickly in Portland's network of divorce attorneys and therapists. She understands what it feels like to rebuild after loss. My clients were mostly women starting over, though I welcomed anyone who needed a fresh beginning. The income was steady, not extravagant, but sustainable. There were no debts, no hidden accounts, no creative accounting. Everything was paid transparently. The small apartment Riley and I still lived in had finally become a real home. The kitchen was now painted that same blue-gray Riley's art corner, overflowed with drawings and paintings taped to the walls, and our lives were simple, but entirely our own. Riley had just turned 15 and was thriving in ways I hadn't dared hope for during those dark years. Her grades had skyrocketed. She made the honor roll last semester for the first time, and she continued therapy sessions twice a month, processing everything in healthy ways with Dr. Turner's guidance. Her relationship with Derek was minimal by her own choice. Derek was currently in county jail awaiting sentencing after his conviction in September, and Riley had visited him once, telling me beforehand, "I need to see him, to understand everything." She returned silent and withdrawn for several hours, then came to me in the kitchen and said quietly, "Dad's still blaming everyone except himself." Riley decided not to visit again until he took responsibility, a boundary she set with remarkable maturity for a 15-year-old. Our mother-daughter relationship had grown closer than ever. We had weekend traditions, now hot chocolate on Saturday mornings, working on design projects together at the drafting table, and long conversations about architecture life and the future. Riley was learning basic architectural principles and genuinely loved it already, thinking about architecture school for college. Last week, Riley had shown me a draft of her college essay, still 3 years away, but she was planning ahead and asked me to read a section aloud. I read, "My mother taught me that patience is power. She showed me that justice takes time, but it arrives. She proved that you don't have to be loud to be strong." I cried when I finished reading, overwhelmed with pride for the young woman my daughter was becoming. Riley looked at me with concern and asked, "Mom, are you okay?" I smiled through tears and said, "More than okay, sweetheart. I'm proud of you." She hugged me then, and I felt the weight of those 3 years of planning and fear finally lift completely. This was what I had fought for, not revenge, not wealth, but the chance to raise my daughter in truth and safety. Derek Ramsey's criminal trial had begun in September, 6 months after our divorce was finalized. The charges were extensive fraud, bribery of public officials, conspiracy to commit murder, and involuntary manslaughter in connection with Logan Sterling's death. Brett Palmer had testified against him under a plea agreement describing in detail how Derek had instructed him to cut my brake lines to make the problem disappear. Gary Mitchell, the building inspector, had also testified under an immunity deal, confirming he had accepted $47,000 over 4 years to approve buildings he knew were dangerously substandard. Autumn testified about Logan's death and the systematic negligence that led to it, her voice steady as she described finding her brother's body in that apartment at 47 Riverside Drive. I testified about the financial fraud, the plagiarism accusations, the custody battle, and finally about discovering the cut brake lines and Derek's recorded conversation with Brett. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning with their verdict guilty on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for next month, and Derek faced 8 to 12 years in federal prison. Multiple civil lawsuits were pending from Logan's family and other residents of Derek's buildings who had suffered from his negligence. His bankruptcy had been finalized in August. He lost everything just as the settlement had ensured he would. Thomas Hutchins had written an op-ed for the Portland Tribune titled, "When Clients Won't Listen," distancing himself from Derek's actions while quietly acknowledging he should have recognized the red flags earlier. Autumn Sterling had moved to Seattle for a fresh start, and her interior design business was flourishing with a specialty in memorial spaces, designs that honored loved ones who had passed. She sent me a card last month that read, "Logan's case is settled. My family has justice. Thank you for giving me purpose in my grief." We texted, occasionally bound by the battle we had fought together, but each building separate lives now. Brett Palmer had pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and testified against Derek in exchange for a reduced sentence of 7 years. He had shown genuine remorse during his testimony, saying, "I was wrong. I'm sorry. I should never have done what he asked." Andrea Walsh remained both my attorney and my friend, and we met for monthly lunches to talk about life beyond legal cases. At our last lunch, Andrea had said with a smile, "You taught me something, Audrey. Sometimes the quietest clients have the smartest strategies." Pete Douglas, the private investigator who had helped me gather evidence throughout those 3 years, was now a regular collaborator. I referred clients to him, women who needed to safely document abuse, gather financial records, or confirm suspicions before making their next move. Pete specialized in helping women build cases the right way, and his business had grown alongside mine. On a Saturday morning in October, Riley and I sat together at the drafting table working on a design for a new client, a woman rebuilding her life after 20 years of marriage. I knew exactly how to help her because I had done it myself. Riley was sketching the kitchen layout while I worked on the floor plan, and we moved in comfortable silence punctuated by occasional questions and suggestions. The sunlight warmed my back, the sound of jazz played softly from my laptop speakers, and I felt something I hadn't felt in over a decade peace. This wasn't the life I had imagined 12 years ago when I married Derek Ramsey with dreams of building an empire together. But it was better. It was honest. It was mine. Riley looked up from her sketch and said, "Mom, what do you think about adding a window seat here? She mentioned she loves reading." I studied the layout and nodded. "That's perfect, Riley. It gives her a place that's just for her." Riley smiled and returned to her drawing, and I watched her for a moment, this strong, thoughtful young woman who had survived her father's manipulation and come out the other side with empathy and wisdom. But this story isn't really about Derek Ramsey or his downfall or even the justice that finally caught up with him after years of fraud and negligence. This story is about what happens after. It's about the foundations we build when we finally build for ourselves. It's about reclaiming a name, a profession, an identity that someone tried to erase. It's about two women, Autumn and me, who found each other in the wreckage of Derek's deceptions and built something Derek never understood: a partnership based on truth. It's about a daughter who learned that strength doesn't require volume and that patience carefully applied is the most powerful weapon of all. And it's about the quiet, steady work of rebuilding one blueprint, one client, one Saturday morning at a time, until the life you're living is finally, completely, honestly your own. The client had just left another woman starting over her eyes, filled with the same mixture of fear and determination I had seen in my own mirror 3 years ago. I sat alone in Pierce Architecture Studio as October afternoon light slanted through the large windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The silence felt comfortable now, no longer heavy with secrets or calculations. I had spent 12 years building Derek's empire, 3 years building his prison, and now I was building something that would actually last, foundations based on truth instead of exploitation, recognition instead of erasure, partnership instead of control. The blueprint on my desk wasn't for a massive commercial development or a luxury residence designed to impress investors. It was for a modest kitchen renovation for a woman who wanted her home to feel like hers again after 25 years of marriage. I understood that desire completely. The lessons from those 15 years, 12, building 3, destroying, had crystallized into principles I now shared with every client who walked through my door. The first lesson was knowing your worth, both professionally and personally. Never work without recognition, never accept becoming invisible, and understand that your name on your work is essential, not optional. Derek had taken all the credit for 12 years while I disappeared into the background, my contributions erased from every building, every project, every success. Now every blueprint that left this office bore my name prominently. The second lesson was documentation. My grandmother's wisdom about keeping records had saved my life. Those encrypted backups, those meticulously organized files, those 3 years of evidence had defeated Derek's emotional manipulation in court. Evidence beats emotion every single time in legal proceedings. The third lesson was patience as power. Those 3 years felt endless while I was living them, watching Derek hurt people, watching him manipulate Riley, watching him build his fraud higher and higher. But rushing would have meant failure. Derek needed time to dig his hole deeper, to sign away his assets, to provide me with ironclad evidence. Justice delayed is not justice denied when delay is strategic. The fourth lesson was protecting children above everything else. Riley's safety had been paramount throughout the entire process, which was why Tyler's trust fund remained untouchable and why I had shielded her from the adult battles as much as possible. Never weaponize children in divorce, Derek had tried, and it had backfired catastrophically. The fifth lesson was financial independence as survival. My grandmother's inheritance had been untouchable because it was separate property, and that financial cushion had allowed me to plan instead of panic. Women need their own money, their own credit, their own accounts. Partnership doesn't mean losing yourself financially. The sixth lesson was trusting your instincts. That business card without my name had been the first warning sign, and I should have listened sooner. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't gaslight yourself into accepting unacceptable treatment. And the seventh lesson was that justice takes many forms. It's not always immediate, and sometimes you have to build the case yourself, brick by brick, document by document. The legal system will work if you work it correctly, but truth requires preparation. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at Portland's skyline, the city that had witnessed my rise with Derek, my disappearance into his shadow, my long preparation, and finally my emergence as myself again. My phone buzzed with a text from Riley, coming over after school, bringing design homework. I smiled and replied, "Always ready. Blue-gray paint samples are here." Her response was immediate. "Of course they are. Love you, Mom." I typed back, "Love you more, sweetheart." This exchange, this easy affection, this partnership between mother and daughter built on honesty, this was what I had fought for. Not revenge, not Derek's suffering, but the chance to raise Riley in truth. To the women in stagnant marriages, I would say this document everything silently before confronting anything loudly. Protect your assets legally and separately. Your children's stability matters most. Patience isn't weakness, it's tactics. You're not crazy. Trust your gut. To young women starting careers, never give up your profession for someone else's convenience. Always maintain separate money and credit. Demand recognition and equity in every partnership. Partnership means both names matter equally. Invisible work is still exploitation, no matter how it's framed. To women rebuilding after loss or divorce, you're not broken, you're restructuring. Small progress is still progress. Foundations take time to set properly. Blue-gray kitchens are optional but highly recommended. Starting over isn't failure, it's courage. And to all women, regardless of circumstance, love should never require you to disappear. Partnership means equality, not erasure. Patient justice will arrive. You're stronger than you think. Build for yourself first, always. The phone rang, interrupting my reflection. I answered, "Pierce Architecture Studio, this is Audrey." A woman's voice, hesitant but determined. "Hi, I'm going through a divorce. I need help redesigning my space, making it mine again." I understood immediately. "I can help with that. When would you like to come in for a consultation?" We scheduled an appointment for next week, and after hanging up, I looked around my office at the portfolio wall displaying projects that all bore my name at the business card on my desk, reading, "Audrey Pierce, Principal Architect." Again at the window, framing Portland's skyline. The door opened and Riley burst in earlier than expected, her backpack heavy with sketches. "Mom, you won't believe the design challenge Mr. Patterson gave us today," she said, spreading papers across the drafting table. "We have to redesign a community space that's been abandoned, make it useful again." I sat down beside her, studying her sketches. "Show me what you're thinking." Riley pointed to her preliminary drawings, explaining her vision with the same passion I had felt at her age before Derek, before the erasure, before I learned that talent without recognition was just exploitation waiting to happen. But Riley would never learn that lesson the hard way. She was learning architecture in an environment where her name would always be on her work, where her contributions would be acknowledged, where partnership meant equality. We worked together for an hour, mother and daughter, bent over blueprints, pencils, moving in comfortable synchronization. The afternoon light shifted to gold, and I realized this was legacy, not buildings bearing someone else's name, but teaching my daughter to build strong foundations in every sense. The final image I'll leave you with is this: Audrey and Riley bent over the drafting table, pencils moving, creating something new together. October sunlight flooding through studio windows, strong foundations, bright futures, better buildings, and a name Pierce that finally permanently belongs to the woman who earned it. Looking back at my story, I want to share something with you. Don't be like I was for those 12 years. Don't disappear into someone else's shadow. Don't wait until you've lost yourself completely before you start documenting the truth. I gave Derek 12 years of my talent, my identity, and my trust, and he used every bit of it to build an empire while erasing my name. The lesson I learned, the one I'm sharing with you now, is this: God gives us instincts for a reason. When that first business card arrived without my name, God was speaking through my unease. I ignored it. When Derek demanded I stay home while he took credit for my designs, God was showing me the pattern. I rationalized it. Don't make my mistakes. Listen when God whispers warnings before he has to shout them through crisis. The greatest lesson from those 3 years of patient planning is that God honors preparation combined with faith. I documented evidence-built alliances and waited for justice not out of revenge, but out of trust that God's timing would vindicate truth. Proverbs says, "The patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit." And I learned that patience isn't weakness, it's warfare. God sees everything, even what happens in darkness, and he brought it all to light when the time was right. My advice to you: build your life on foundations that honor truth, protect your worth, and never let anyone convince you that love requires your erasure. If this story resonated with you, if you've survived something similar or know someone who needs to hear it, please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Hit the like button if this message spoke to you, share this video with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to this channel for more stories that inspire, educate, and empower. Thank you for following Audrey's journey to the very end. I want to remind you that the next story you'll encounter may contain fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If this type of content isn't for you, please feel free to exit now and choose something better suited to your preferences. Thank you for being here.